This is Help Save Our World Speak number 99. The topic today is civilizations are conspiracies. They are intentional, unnatural, unsustainable, and definitely not human nature, because things just get so often, oh, it's human nature, just blame it on the way humans are, and it's not true. They are specifically designed to make the rich richer at the expense of all others and all of nature. Civilizations are centralization of wealth and power pyramid schemes, which are based on negative, destructive, plundering, and enslavement gang logic. It's like when a gang begins to form, they have these basic principles of like, there is only one gang leader and what he says is gospel and you do as he says, and that's the way it is. It's exactly the same system, but it has grown from a small gang to being many gangs of religions of many, many descriptions and whatever around the world. So the few believing that they have the God-given right to take whatever they want and do as they please, they perceive themselves as having no sort of collective responsibility. Basically, like naughty children, they're just doing as they please, and they don't care that there's one pond and that pond's got to feed like, I don't know, 50 people with fish. And if they take all the fish today, there'll be nothing left for everyone to sustain their lives. But they don't care. They're just like, I'm taking all the fish because I have a right. Then unaware people living in these civilizations are also unwittingly supporting and empowering the negative agenda of those in power. So you don't think that you're doing anything wrong. You're just living your life. You're doing your best. You're trying as hard as you can. You're getting a job. You're working, supporting your family. And you don't realize that you are perpetuating that negative construct. And most of us, to some degree, are doing that. Like, you can almost say almost all of us, except for people living in totally isolated indigenous cultures where they lived solely at the whim of nature and whatever, except for them buying a computer or whatever it is that we're doing, we're contributing to this destructive negative paradigm. But dying is not the solution. So what is it? These man-made civilizations are based on fear, hate, lies, deception, manipulation, indoctrination, and enforced ignorance. They require blind belief. You've got to believe and you've got to have faith in that the system's going to be like the one for you, so that they can manipulate and brainwash and control the thoughts and the behavior of the population. These few people who are like these totally irresponsible people want absolute control of your thoughts, your mind, your actions, and so on. The rich gain more wealth and power through the unquestioning support and subservience of people to their power. These people are brainwashed by religions and schooling or education into uninformed, I use the word ignorant, but I mean people who tend to ignore enslaved followers. The elite's purpose being to plunder the commons, which they call the world's resources. You know, it's like there's a loss of connection to what the earth provides when it just becomes resources. You know, you can just go and take the resources from there, and it doesn't matter if you wipe out a whole population of people or drive them off somewhere else or enslave them or whatever you do. You're just taking resources. There's just like a total lack of empathy or compassion, you know. So initially, those within the pyramid, at the top, you've got the ruler at the top of the pyramid. You've got the upper class, which is the small pyramid beneath that. Then you've got the middle class, and then you have the lower working class. They all benefit initially from the system, because the system actually goes out there and takes from nature and takes resources from all over the world and plunders from ethnic groups and whatever. It does this marauding, brings that wealth in, and the people in the pyramid benefit from it. However, eventually, after sucking the wealth out of everything around, the system starts to, as you were saying, eat its young. It starts to suck out the wealth of the pyramids, the actual pyramid itself. So the middle class collapses and the lower class collapses, and eventually becomes this slave class, or the peasants. And the upper class just continues to rise in wealth and power, resulting in the absolute monopolization, centralized ownership of everything, autocratic, authoritarian, male-dominated rule, and one world government. Like, that's the supreme place where they want to go to. It's like, oh my gosh, how much damage do you want to do just to be the one? Initially, this dangerous and destructive doctrine, which is actually cloaked in truth and kindness and love and love thy neighbor and all of these like wonderful things. It's like, oh, it's so nice. I want to be one of those people because they're good people. Is usually spread through missionaries to indigenous cultures. And quite often in these situations, what they do is they say to the group of a few like dependent followers that all the people who live on the land, the indigenous people, they are stupid, they are ignorant, and only the intelligent are within our religion, because and they believe in that God. So in this way, they deceive many naive, trusting, kind people who fall for this story, and it's like also they give like free food and free this and free, and it's like, it's a lot easier to get free food than it is to go out there and grow your own, and know the seasons and everything about nature to be able to survive. So they create a dependent group. And then those who refuse to accept the gang logic are forced to do so. And I think of colonialism, I think of the Queen sending her military troops across down to Cape Town and out into the hinterland, into Africa, or Southern Africa, first of all. And it wasn't just Britain, it was all of the colonial powers from Europe who were like gaining ground in different territories. But what they did is, first of all, sent out the missionaries to convert the people. And if that didn't work, then they came in there with their war machines and they plundered and just drove people off the land and murdered. It was horrifying. By imposing fear, oppression, created and perpetuated by violence, militaries, wars, slash and burn, rape and pillage, decimate, it's like wiping out large numbers of people, but the principle is killing 1 in 10 from the Roman Empire. The destruction of life-sustaining systems, like if you can't stop the people, then burn their lands or whatever. Then, of course, through these systems, we've had genocide, all forcing dependence on the pyramid scheme. We've had just so many examples of the horrors of this system being imposed throughout Africa and throughout South America and literally around the world. If you go back all the way through history, it's like it's been happening all over the world. And even more sinister was the gradual imposition of violence by political manipulations and abuses and subjugation of the majority of people and destruction of nature. These artificial man-made civilization, monopolistic pyramid schemes are built upon lies and deception and driven by fear, blind belief, the ignorance of the masses, which are implemented by the few for the benefit of the few, are legitimized by the manipulation of language, in this way, they legitimize their daylight robbery and plundering, instilling the belief in their followers that they are the good guys and the others are evil. Now, I just think of like the word like education, it's like, we're educating our children. No, you're not. You're indoctrinating your children. And civilization, oh my gosh, what's civilized about it? What it does to the world. How can you use a word like that? That's you're lying, that's not true. It's uncivilized what that pyramid scheme is doing to nature and people and whatever, just around the world. So all of which are conspiracies, where a select few designed and developed them for their own benefit. So they could take what they want, regardless of others' suffering and the inevitable environmental collapse and extinction of all life on Earth, because you can only take so much before there's nothing left to take. Then the followers become the spreaders of the mind control paradigm. They begin indoctrinating their defenseless, it's horrifying to think what parents do to their children, their defenseless children into that way of life. They put them in through Christian national education systems and force them to attend churches and Sunday schools and religious schools and so on. So it's like the parents have the disease or the plague and they hand it on to their children without realizing they're doing it. Do you want to talk about any of that?
Yeah, as I mentioned, you and I kind of can see that, but so many of us, and even you and I probably for much of our lives, were under that and didn't even know that that's what was going on. So we're unwilling participants to megatrends, which have to do with the despotism and the colonialism and the hateism and everything else that comes along with it, in order to separate people, remove them from their own power, and have them think that things could be a lot worse if they don't join along with the local gang, as you mentioned, the local mob that's running your neighborhood. And local mobs at this point are transnational, banking, farming, protection, you name it, because the world is global now, at least as far as the reach of one person to any other person on the planet. And all we're seeing, especially in the news and the media, is propaganda for whatever the local or even the global concept is. And I forget the word for the plan, the vision of 2020 or 2022 or whatever they call it, the New World Order and Agenda 20, whatever it was, right? It seems to be shifting. And that's just out there as, we're giving you an idea of what we're imposing on you, but you have no idea, because even though you're seeing this, we're turning up the fires little by little. We're removing rights little by little. We're causing weather modification and skirmishes and whatever else happens. And it's not conspiracy when it's affecting you personally. And, we're starting to feel that the heat is being turned up on the little melting pot of unaware citizens of Earth.
Yeah. I sort of like that it's not conspiracy. To me, it's like it's conspiracy taken to the most extreme form. It's like we're conspiring, and just believe us. We've got this all under control. We'll show you the way. But
right.
And all self-serving. It's got nothing to do with caring about or compassion for other human beings. And their conspiring is out in the open. It's like, we're going to have one world government. In other words, all of these other religions and groups and whatever pyramid schemes are all just going to be brought together as one. It's like, oh my gosh. And then you see why, the I don't know, the Christians and the Arabs and the whatever, and they're all fighting with one another to gain control, power, territory, resources. And that's the war. The war is between these pyramids of power. And, and ultimately, one group or one whatever is going to have the ultimate pyramid scheme of totalitarian rule. It's insanity.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm referring to with the agenda and the New World Order and all of that. And it's been going on for a long time, Dennis. You know that. You go back to all of the secret groups that have been impacting the world and influencing it and directing it from the shadows, but still we get that they're there. So, and you're right. The word conspiracy simply means breathing together. Yeah. So when two people meet, you and I are in a conspiracy right now, even though we're not sharing breath, where we're sharing the breath through words, right?
Yes.
So when people have purposely misinterpreted the word conspiracy and put the negative spin on it, it's to take away the charge that the word has. And I think you had mentioned something before about how the words create the context, which create the belief systems and then force the actions that happen. But it starts with the words. Certainly coming in and raping and pillaging and burning somebody's village, you don't need words for that. You see what's going on and you're experiencing it. And that's kind of what I said with the conspiracy. It's a conspiracy until it's actually affecting you. And then it's not a conspiracy, it's an experience. And I think the word conspiracy has been thrown on people that are experiencing the negativity of the influencers that are out there. And they're just like, no, that's just conspiracy, it's like, don't look behind the curtain, right? Wizard of Oz. Yeah. Absolutely. That's a conspiracy. This is not a conspiracy. Close those curtains again.
Yeah.
So we're in agreement and alignment, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, is anything that, like, say, maybe we would be discussing that is against like the macro conspiracy. Oh, that's a conspiracy. Like, we're the conspirators, we're the bad guys, we're the evil ones, because how dare us question the macro conspiracy, because that's not a conspiracy, that's just the nature of man. That's just the way things are. And it's acceptable for the rich to go and plunder the earth. It's like, who could question that? Because that's just the way things are. That's not a conspiracy. That happened because humans are like that. It's like, really?
Right. Well, many humans have become that. Yes. Humans in general, I still err towards humans come from love, most of them. When you get underneath all of the influences and circumstances that cause them to kind of shift from that. And there are certain groups and factions, and becoming more and more, even to the point where they can genetically modify us to think along the ways that are beneficial to them, again, and their power hoarding. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's just, I think the importance of doing this thing that we're doing here is people won't see it until somebody like us come along and say, hey, look at this. I mean, this is what's happening. And it's like, oh my gosh. And the stories that people are told, I just about did a double backflip when I was talking to an African guy the other day. And he turned around and he said, all white people are Jews. And I'm like, what? I'm like, no, we all come from the same mothers in Africa, all of us. And we're all sort of like, we've got this genetic timeline that we all, doesn't matter whether you whatever, I don't know, whatever ethnic group that your ancestors were, even the people who became that nation were just people of the land, it's like, and then the infection of the pyramid scheme began. And then those people became terrible people because of that. No, It really is. We're all human beings on this planet. We come from love, and it's just this whole categorization, oversimplification, and categorizing of people into boxes. And those are evil people, and these are good people, and it's nonsense. It's like we're all one family, and that hatred and that segregation and that whatever, people take advantage of people who are uninformed. So what we're doing is we're informing people. But I do understand what he's saying too, because the religions and colonialism and all of that resulted in all of us, from ancient, wherever the pyramid schemes have began, and their influence and their capturing of our ancestors and so on, all the way through, and us becoming schooled into that way of life, and then us coming to their society or their indigenous cultures and imposing this paradigm on them. I can see where like that logic might come from, but horrifying. It's like, no, we're brothers and sisters. What are you doing?
I have just came up, excuse me, a little thought on that. That let's say you have a village, right, and which is historically, I think, accurate, and somebody has found a way to do something better. Let's say they rose up from the pack and became a leader of maybe we should do it this way, and that plan worked, and they got the kudos from the people in the town. Well, there's a couple of things that can happen there, probably many more, but either that leader can then teach everybody else that thought process, right? Education. Or that leader can hold it within themselves and be greedy and then become a dominator because they have the information and the others don't. And I think we can see this, whether it's, politicians or, whatever kind of leaders, even groups that you may have participated in, throughout your life. Somebody rises to the top because they had a better idea or a quicker idea or whatever it might have been. And people said yes. And from that validation, this person just assumed power and authority rather than the collaboration, which is what you and I are suggesting is a better way to go through the world. So I think it's in some ways, I don't want to say built into the human psyche, but I think the circumstances have allowed people like this to choose the other direction. And once they got the power, as you know, it's hard to relinquish. Maybe not you personally, but as certainly experienced and seen, it's hard for people to take it back because the owners of power realize that they now have power. And rather than its power to raise up our community, power, and again, not power to raise up and then go take over another community, but power to raise us up, share the information. And I think that was probably part of the early civilizations, if we can call them that. The early tribes, I know in ancient Greece, there was a collection of city-states, and they finally said, you know what, maybe if we join together, we can create more, and which is where democracy and the country of Greece was formed, basically from a number of different city-states that probably had leaders and their own systems, seeing how they could combine. And the sad part, I think, in history is that usually happens as a defensive measure rather than as a proactive offensive measure. Let's go out and build the world we want to live in, and rather than the world we want to have. If you get that distinction, have meaning ownership, not contribution. So, I mean, that's my little rant on it. But yeah, I think there's always in that individual the choice point of, do I grasp this power and run with it, or do I grasp this power and share it? And I think those are the choice points that a lot of people on Earth have made in the, no, I want to grab it and own it and run with it. So it may be just a built-in, I don't know, a built-in mechanism for us. And I think the world over the past many centuries has just shown, no, this is the good thing, right? Seize power, be control, be the leader, be the whatever. which then gives them rationale then to build this.
Yeah.
Yeah, be the
Yeah.
monolithic company that now owns everything. Where's the sharing? Where's the collaboration? Where's the community? It doesn't exist in those at all, except to further their own interests on a day-to-day level.
Yeah, I think you brought up some great points there. I think the main areas of power became, of course, safety and security, which became the dominant males in a community, and then it became the gangs and the kings and the queens and whatever, and that became that security. When it came to ownership, and it wasn't we're going to share evenly and fairly, then it became a need to maintain that negative imbalance of power.
Yep.
And
Yep.
the moment that built into the gangs and the whole gang logic. And then, of course, you had the healers and the spiritual leaders, like that whole intuitive sense and so on. All those people within the tribes became another power base. And there was always getting in cahoots with those who had power, because the religious leaders had power. So, and then there was technology, which basically for those people to stay in power, they had to have more and more advanced weaponry and tools and whatever. So there were these different aspects of power, which have now become extreme forms of atomic bombs and tanks and whatever that's technology. And then, of course, control of all of the technology we have become like that's a power base. And another one power base became the religions, and the other power base became the governments and the kings and the queens and the empires and emperors and so on. So like there were these like basic tenets that grew into these macro versions of what they began at. And you see that in indigenous cultures like the Sangoma or the I don't know what you call them in South America. They call them the
chiefs. Chiefs or shaman.
No. Well, the chief would be the power base of kings and queens. All right. The shaman would be the herbalist, the spiritual leader, and that sort of thing. Then technology is basically, I mean, you'll have certain people that make tools or whatever, and they became the blacksmiths and the whatever, and then technology developed from there, So it's really interesting how those like aspects of society grew. But the other point that I wanted to bring up was in a well brought up indigenous culture, there is this always the reference or the referral back to the natural wisdom of nature. It's like, oh, we can't take more than one fish each, otherwise there will be no more fish in the pond. Every 2 days you can take a fish as the community, because of course in the beginning there's so few people, it doesn't really matter. But then as the community starts to get bigger and bigger, it's like, okay, now we have to be careful, maybe one fish a day now, and then the community gets bigger, and then maybe it's only one fish a week, or it's like, and then we have to spread out, decentralize. And then, you find other places or create other abundance as you spread out. And those like principles of nature are like fundamental to your coexistence for your survival on the planet. But the moment that natural wisdom gets thrown out the window and it's like, I don't care, I'm taking the fish.
Yeah.
That's when everything breaks down. And I mean, we can see that there's a progression there, there's a progression of population control, and there's so many other variables that we have to look at that are very real. And cultures did some perceived terrible things to maintain their population at acceptable levels in different places. But if you see it in the context of sustainability, then maybe they weren't so bad, I don't know.
Yeah, I think we can get it's heading for some kind of critical mass of implosion or whatever it turns out to be. You're talking about having to enforce a rule for the good of the community about how many fish you can take per week, right? And I'm sure there was some surveillance, and then they created rules about if you take two, then this will happen to you or whatever. And then authority came up to the point where the granular collection of data on everybody to see if they are going against what the ruling class is about. This, how much information do we give on a nanosecond by nanosecond basis, and the amount of data that's being collected and crunched. And despite what people say about there's so many people in the world, what makes you think they care about you? Well, maybe they don't care about me, but in the aggregate, they're seeing trends, and then they're ruling on those trends. Just last week, the Supreme Court voted to remove what was a constitutional right towards health care for women. Just wiped it right out. And of course, the political party that's had the agenda to do that is hiding behind religion, the sacrosanct answer to everything. And it's being projected that once that has happened, and we're already seeing it, state by state by state is starting to remove more privileges, more privileges, more privileges. And this is not a light concept, and it just happened like that because of an illegal placement of judges on the Supreme Court of incompetent people who pledged their allegiance to that particular party or that concept. And as we're finding it as individuals, people don't think a lot anymore about what they do for a living or even a life. They're just going along with, what am I allowed to do? Okay, I don't want to rock the boat. Well, guess what? The boat is so frigging huge, you're not going to make much of a difference if you're going to continue to think that way. So we are at a crux, and it probably has happened many times during the human existence on Earth. I don't know that there was ever a communication like we have now. I say that because I don't know it as for sure, but we've seen so many things around the world, such as the pyramids and energy centers and things like that, and technologies that, for people not having any contact at all from what we say, have the exact same thing showing up in their countries around the world. So maybe there was a leadership or a control or a society that did communicate globally before that. And as we've seen, all of those power centers are now either tourist traps or they're covered over by nature, right? Nature's reclaimed them by growing into them. But this time in the world for you and I, assuming that we understand time and the progress of civilization, we're seeing that major thrust towards that authoritarianism on a global scale. And I had one last thought on that. And it's that you don't need to be woke to see it. If you just, that's not woke. That's just opening your eyes to what's here. Your eyes haven't been closed. You just haven't been willing to see what's there because you're taking other conversations about how to interpret things. So yeah, we're at a moment where it's not a great awakening. I think it's a great shrugging of stop this nonsense. The problem is, in order that we see to get rid of it, requires us to be like them in many ways. And that's how people approach it. Well, we need to fight against authoritarianism. Yeah, okay. Did you amass all of the weapons and the systems and everything else that you needed to do in order to accomplish that? Or do you have another plan, which is more pacifist in nature, more loving in nature? Not more, actually it is. It's pacifist and loving in nature and sustainable and inclusive, while at the same time being equitable. And, this is a great world for us to imagine. And if we don't imagine and start to put in motion our beliefs about it, we're going to have a lot of trouble making anything happen.
Yeah. It's 20 past already.
Yeah, I just took a look down at my phone. Okay, I'm going to have to run. Sorry.
All right. No, it's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been a very fast hour, hasn't it? Or 45 minutes.
Yeah, I know it's been quick, but yeah, it was
Great.
really good stuff. I think I enjoyed
Yeah,
it.
I think we got into the nitty gritty of some things. Yes.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks.
Take
Cheers.
care,
Okay.
Dennis.
Bye
All right.
bye.